Texas. When we get to talk about a collegiate record right off the top, Gordon, I do not think we were expecting Yared Nuguse to break the collegiate record in the prelim in a 1500 at the ACC championships.
We may not have been expecting it, but I did get Sean Carlson. I'm not sure if he said it to me on the air or off air. When I did an interview with him at the after NCAAs on Zoom, I did ask, like, hey, how's Yared going to get the standard? And he says, well, we can do it at a prelim at ACCs. And I was like, oh, okay. But, like, I kind of was like, well, you don't really run 3:34 in a prelim. Maybe you can run, like, a sub 4 mile to qualify for NCAA indoors, but, like, you're not going to run 3:34 in a prelim. And he was actually thinking that the whole time. Maybe the original plan was run that 3:34 in Oregon against the Cole Hawkers and Cooper Tears, but that didn't work. He came back and he got it done. And that is an incredible thing. And it also shows, once again, why aren't these elite athletes on the men's side in the U.S. being able to, if a college kid is able to solo it, now there's no excuse for you not going with the rabbit. There's no excuse for you not pushing that third lap. If a kid who's 21 years old can just do it by himself for 3 3/4 of a lap, there's no excuse for multiple people to be able to run sub 3:35. It's an incredible feat. And yeah, we could now have 2 college kids in the 1500 make the Olympic team, which would be wild. I don't think that's ever happened before.
It was shocking to find out. Let me just tell you about the journey of how I figured out how good of a performance this was, because it underscores just how amazing Nuguse's run was. So I'm at home last night. I get the text from Travis. You were on the group text too, with the link to the finish, to the shot, to, hey, here's his time, right? Yared Nuguse 3:34. But in the tweet, in that initial tweet, it said he gets the standard. Didn't say anything about the NCAA record. And I thought, okay, that's weird. Maybe there was a typo here, right? This is a prelim. Maybe there was some sort of mistake. So I do some investigating, right? And I find out, because there weren't that many tweets out there yet. It had just happened. But then you see other people repeating it. Okay, 3:34. Okay, damn. This guy just ran 3:34 in the prelim. But then I go back, and then I think about something you said last episode or 2 episodes ago, where you said, okay, Notre Dame might have some teammates of Yared help pace. And I know it said solo in there. So I was like, okay, let me dive into the actual results, see how many Notre Dame guys were in there. There were no Notre Dame guys in his heat.
Yeah.
Okay. So then I'm like, there was clearly no rabbiting here. So when they said solo, there was no help from his teammates. Okay, I'm going to dive a little deeper. I'm going to go a level deeper here, Gordon. Maybe someone in that heat just went out crazy fast and served as an unintentional rabbit for Yared. Someone who wasn't his teammate, but somebody who went out in 55 or maybe 57. So then I look at the actual live splits, and what do I find, Gordon? Dude was ahead by 2 seconds at the 300, and his lead only grew from there. He had no intention of running with everybody. This was a straight from the gun, old school, I'm better than you, I can run the collegiate record by myself race for Yared Nuguse. And if you ever need to quantify this season, next season, the season after, hey, how good is Yared Nuguse? All you need to do is say the following sentence. He broke the collegiate record in a prelim at a conference meet running by himself. That's it. You don't need to say anything else about how good Yared Nuguse is.
Is this the first ever collegiate record? I mean, maybe you don't know, that had no pacing whatsoever? That's like 800 and up? Like, even like when Donovan Brazier was running his fast 800s, breaking the collegiate record, he had his another, I forget, Hernandez or something. He had someone going out with him through the first 400 to keep it moving. When we see these fast 1500s at Brian Clay or fast 5Ks and 10Ks at Peyton Jordan, there's rabbits galore. Didn't have he was in the lead after probably 10 meters, right? There
Mhm.
was zero like, hey, all right, you don't just we'll get you through 800 and then you go. And it just showed that he was on a mission. It showed that
Yeah.
he knew exactly what he wanted to do, and it also showed he had no fear because I started getting a little bit of doubt because he pulled out of West Coast. He had only run a 5K in like March, and I was like,
Right.
dude, we're getting close to the trials. If you want to be in it, you gotta start doing something. And then does the Oregon meet, and you're like, all right, he's doing something, but then you're like, oh, is it a little too late? Because when are you going to get an opportunity like this? And he was like, I don't need no opportunity. I just need a timer and I'm done and I'm
Yeah.
good and we'll get it. And
Right.
to be honest though, if he were to ran like 335.5 and not gotten it, I think he still would have his world rep based on the way he's doing it, he would have kept on attempting it. And if he would have had like 335s and 2 340s under his belt, he probably would have got in on world ranking. But now there's no math involved. It's an obvious. I have the standard. If I'm top 3 at the Olympic trials, I'm an Olympian. And he simplified it. And hey, man, we'll go through our U.S. rankings, but I think I was ahead of the curve because you'll see where I had him in my U.S. rankings. It was before this performance. So he solidified what I think he's going to do at the trials with this 334.
This was, in many ways, it's strange to say, but it just speaks to the 1500. This was the perfect opportunity to run the fastest time because, say things weren't going well by 1200 or by 1000, he could shut it down, cruise in, still make the final. He doesn't need to risk the 10 points. He is on a team still. He is in college still. Those things are still important. Whereas if he tried this in, say, an NCAA final or even an ACC final when the field is better and he just didn't have it on that day, then the risk is higher. But we always talk about moments in the sport and when they're magnified and when they become a bit overshadowed. And a lot of that just has to do with circumstance. Who else was racing that day? What was on the line? For Nuguse, like an ACC prelim, pretty low stakes. In the career trajectory of Yared Nuguse, an ACC prelim is pretty low stakes, which is what makes this, in many ways, cooler, I think, than if he did it the week before. Because in the week before, there was every reason to believe he was going to break the collegiate record. You had a stacked field. You had rabbits. You had this amazing new facility, which by all intents and purposes has a fast track. And they came up a little short in doing it. And then you go to the complete opposite end of the track and field spectrum for a conference meet prelim. And he's just like, no, I'm going to go. I'm going to go. I'm going to break the thing literally by myself. He did this.
Yeah, you look at the results from a week ago. I mean, it was the best field he could be in the nation, and he comes up, a little bit under a second away, and then they just take away all that, where it's just you by yourself. You know you're going to make the final. You just got to go and click off your 400s that you need to click off, and you run 334. And hey, man, he's been the real deal since I think 2018. I mean, he came on the scene in 2018 with the DMR. He established I'm not a fluke in 2019. Then you kind of forget about it, right? Because of 2020 pandemic, he doesn't run indoors. We said everyone is talking about Cole Hawker this, Cole Hawker that, and Yared's like, dude, I'm still the man, and he is the man, and it's 100%.
Well, because if you were gonna nitpick about Nuguse, it would be like, well, what's his PB? And then he answered that when he dropped it down to 335 at the Oregon meet, and now he's the collegiate record holder. Because no one's questioning his kick, no one's questioning his tactical acumen at all. So if he has this piece solidified too, he's got both going for him. This also reminds me of when Lincoln was on the show, when you were gone, and Lincoln took a break from his tennis pro career to come talk to us. And he was talking about, he's a baseball guy, so he's talking about Moneyball, about analytics, basically the best way for a 1,500-meter runner to win, and how not everybody has the same path to win in every race, and not everybody has the same path to run a fast time. For some people, rabbiting is great. It works. It's and I would say the majority of people, that's the case. But in certain circumstances, maybe not, because then you're relying on somebody else to set the pace. And it was just the ultimate show of strength that Nuguse could do this. And it does make me think, again, like, are we over-rabbiting things? I go back to the Doha World Championships where Timothy Chariot was just, okay, I'm better than everybody. I'm going to run. Now, he didn't break the world record, but he ran a really, really fast time, and a time that you probably wouldn't think was possible if I just said, hey, this person's going to solo it. If I asked you, Yared Nuguse, like, we go back in time, I said, Yared Nuguse is going to run an all-out 1500 from the gun where nobody's going to be within 50 meters of him. What would you have thought his potential could be in a race like that without a rabbit?
336 mid.
Right.
Or
And we hold that.
high.
Yeah, and that's because of history, right? You just don't think that someone's going to exceed what they could do with rabbits, because you always think rabbit is a positive all across the board. Not necessarily with 800, but with 1500 and up, you always think the rabbit is the best way. But it reminded me of those other crazy collegiate, like the Jenny Simpson solo 5,000 run, the German Fernandez indoor mile solo run, where people were just so much better, and because of the circumstances, there was a conference meet or they couldn't find anybody to run with them, they just are left out there on their own devices, and it's the purest form of running, right? It's running that these athletes probably experienced when they first got into the sport and they were better than everybody, but their high school dual meet, they weren't sending rabbits out to run with them, I don't think, unless they were very sophisticated high school. It was just, you're better, go out there and run. Now you get to the all-star meets at the end, and then you have company, and now we know the competition's just getting better and better. But I just remember so many moments of star athletes growing up where all the video you would see was just them from the gun. That was it, right? Go back, watch those Ultra Line races. I
mean, if we look at bring up on the screen, this is the previous collegiate record, Josh Kerr's 3:35.0 that Nuguse broke. Look at there. Kerr is in 4th place. He's behind. A teammate is rabbiting up front. Lopez Lemong's in the race. There's a field of like 20 guys. They're trying to get single file. And that's what it took for Josh Kerr to break the collegiate record. And then it's such a stark contrast to see that's what you think it is, and then see the way Yared Nuguse does it, and it's like, it's just by myself. Like, this is even more impressive than like that's like a designed race, but then you have like the Bowerman method where they're like, hey, we're all going to hide in the woods and it's going to be perfectly designed. This was just all in his head. The design was just in his head. It's like, you have the track to yourself because you'll be by yourself after 100 meters, and it's just you versus your brain versus the time. So very impressive. We'll talk more about Yared as we get into the U.S. rankings, but hey, man, he's the real deal. I'm sure it's gonna be hard for every day now. Sean Carlson's gonna have to do a little more convincing to get Yared to want to come back to Notre Dame for a senior year. I mean, because if he makes the Olympic team and does well, it's gonna be hard for him to want to come back for another cross country season or another track season, because you feel like you've done everything now. You